Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Don. It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So let's start here. Is it Jack or Jackie, or do you have like four other names?
I sort of do. I'm a very confused person. I actually use three names at the moment. Mm-hmm. I have for different work situations, because I decided that other types of work were taking over my mind a little bit too much, and I wanted to separate them. So I have an art school where I'm Lizzie, which is my middle name is Elizabeth, so that's Lizzie.
Nice.
Jackie is my normal name that I use for, friends and family, and it has been my art name. But then just recently I started using Jaq, which is spelled J-A-Q, because I just liked the idea that it was androgynous and just a little bit different. And I think in a world where there's still this sort of subconscious bias sometimes, I was curious to see how that would work. But I also have a history of names too, because I've had names changed when I was growing up. So I was born a Hayward as a surname.
Okay.
When I was in grade 4, my name was changed to Corbin because my mum remarried, and then I got married and I became Lane as a surname. And I was just about to have my first book published, and I thought, well, no, what? I want my name. So my surname is a made-up name, Grantford. It stands for Grand Step Forward, but we changed the D to a T to make it Grantford. So I don't think there's many Grantfords out there because it is a made-up name. So yeah, that was a very long answer to a very simple question, and you can call me Jack.
Okay,
fine.
Jack. So
Jack,
I love that answer. I love that answer.
It's a big answer.
I too have been changing my name over the last several years.
Oh, okay.
When I grew up, my birth name is actually Aladdin. So Victor is my middle name, and in Spanish culture they always give you a nickname, and so in Spanish, Aladdin, which is Arabic, is Aladino. So my whole entire life they would call me Dino. So my friends, my friends when before I went to college, my family, they all know me as Dino. And then in college I said, I'm going to go into this art world thing. I for the first time I started liking my first name because I hated it when I was a kid. And so I realized that for the next 20 years, I would go by Aladdin, which is what I did. And then I knew about 20 years after that, I would switch to Victor, which was my middle name.
Okay.
And so Victor meaning the conqueror and Aladdin meaning basically the way of the Most High God. I realized that after college, like for those 20 years, I called those my priest years, where I was like, okay, I'm going to go and get in touch with my God. I'm going to go understand this invisible reality. And then at some point that will be over. Not over because it's always with you, but like you'll graduate to another stage in life. And at that point, when I have to actually lead people and train people and that kind of stuff, I'll go by Victor. And so that's what I did. And then now I go by Don Victor because my students a couple of years ago started calling me Don Victor instead of Victor. And I'm like, what the heck's up with this? Right? And so Don Victor. Yeah. And so it stuck, and I just said, screw it. And I embraced it and went with it. And it's been there since. And
Isn't that great?
yeah, and what's kind of cool is like when people come into the academy and they grow to a certain point where they can help facilitate and teach other people, then we change their name, and we'll call them a Don or a Donya, and so we have a couple Dons and Donyas in the academy. It's kind of cool.
How
But yes,
wonderful.
name changing is a
We've
beautiful
got
thing.
similar stories.
Yeah, that's why I think this is going to be a great conversation. You know what the key is?
That's no, go on. So I was just going to say that it's very, it's identity. It's
that's all. Yep.
it's sort of symbolic of you can be who you wish to be, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
But so maybe you were about to say something, and I interrupted you.
Well, it's interesting. We could say it's who you wish you could be, right? Or it's acknowledging who you are, but also acknowledging that there's different dimensions to who you are.
Yeah.
And and that's what I liked about what you were saying. There was I don't know if you've ever seen this movie called the Silence of the Lambs. With Hannibal Lecter. There's this technique.
Very gruesome movie. Good movie, though. It's fantastic.
There's this technique that Hannibal uses. He calls it a mental mansion. And what the principle is that in his mind, it's so well organized that every bit of information, a person's name, like I guess in the books, it says something like when he gets someone's name, he goes inside himself, right? And he imagines himself walking through this mansion. And he goes up the stairs, and he goes into this room, and he goes over to this file cabinet, and he pulls the file cabinet, and he looks for the person's name, and he puts he writes down the name, the phone number, all that stuff, and he puts it in this file cabinet, and he visualizes this entire process. And so that's why he's like super intelligent, because he'll remember a phone number that was given to him 40 years ago or 30 years ago, right? And and when you were saying you have these different aspects or these different dimensions of your life, you're a teacher, you're an artist, you're an illustrator, and then you basically have categorized these and you've named each dimension of yourself, because in as a teacher, it's, or not a teacher, but like running a school, I should say, or running, leading.
Teaching. I have taught and I still do. So So no, the teacher is Lizzie, and it is sort of acknowledging different. Well, it's categorizing the different aspects. But I think what you said, Don, was actually really relevant too. That it is acknowledging growth. That this is where I am at this stage, and this is where I am at this stage, and the different changes. And I think having the different name is, well, it's a bit like a celebration of that, really.
Indeed.
Yeah. So,
a lot of famous people, they'll do that. They'll switch their name. But more importantly, there was an athlete. His name was Bo Derek. I think it was Bo Derek. And he was a football player. And he had, I forget his real name. I should probably look it up. But the story is that on the field, when playing the game, he would rip your head off. Like, he was a beast. But off the field, he was like the kindest, nicest guy. And it was like two different people, right? And I guess in an interview, he said, let's say his real name is Terry Johnson, right? I don't know if that's his real name, but in this interview with Terry, he says, Terry Johnson has never played football. And they're like, what? He's like, no. He said, before I go on the field, I have a ritual where where he digs his foot into the ground, and at that moment he triggers Bo Derek, right, the football player, and maybe not Bo Derek, but whoever that is, right? And by football, I mean American football, not the rest of the world football,
not the Aussie rules.
Aussie rules, and so
we've got quite a different game.
That's awesome. And so he turns that aspect on inside of him, and then when he comes off the field, he turns it off, right? And so he's two different, some would say he's two different personalities. I say he's two different functions. Like, there's the man living
Yeah.
in, who is a very kind, gentle person, and then there's a different function, that he does. So, and that's how I see it with you. It's like you're conscious, and I think that's very fascinating. That you're very conscious. And what's interesting, if anyone looks at your artwork, this conversation totally makes sense because um, I would love to spend a lot of time talking about imagination, self-awareness with
Yeah.
you because I think you have it in spades. So let me ask you a
Oh,
question.
thank you.
Having the wherewithal to understand that you're in this process, you're growing, and then even to have the authority and give yourself the permission to be weird enough. And I'm going to say weird because we're artists, we can be that way.
We can be weird, yeah.
Weird enough to actually say, you know what, I'm going to name myself this and I'm going to name myself that. Um, did that take a
It
while?
was interesting.
Did that take a while for you to come to terms with that? Like to have the courage to do that?
No, it actually was very simple. And I did find it interesting because I genuinely had a couple of people worried about me.
I can understand.
Developing some person, and it created some interesting conversations on Facebook actually because I made an announcement. I thought I should let people know what I'm doing, and a couple of people who genuinely had identity issues touched base with me, and it was really quite lovely because I then learned about their experience, and they loved what I was doing because they said it sort of normalized issues that they have had. And so I thought that was really great that happened. But no, it was a very simple process. I just sort of said, okay, this is what I'm doing today, and everybody's gone, oh, okay. And it's been good, and I found it quite liberating and a little bit of fun too.
Fun.
Just being able to say, oh, this, for this hour I'm doing this type of work, and this will be who I am. And it's liberating, and it wasn't difficult at all.
That's awesome. That's really.
How about you? Did you find it difficult, John? Did you find it a difficult thing?
Not really, because not really. I'll tell you that the most difficult one was the last one. The Don Victor was the most difficult one for me. One, because.
And why is that one?
For two reasons. One, because it didn't come from me. It was a name that was being spoken to me, right? And so it came through other people. And so that was weird. And then also because it comes, I mean, when you say Don Victor, it has so much gravitas to it that I was scared of the responsibility that was required in carrying a name like that, right? And so and to be honest, at this moment in time, April 24th, 2018 at 7:57 a.m., it's still something I struggle with in terms of the weight that I know I'm to stand up and carry with me on that. And so so that's the struggle in it. The saying the name, I've embraced the fact that I think weird and I'm strange. And when I was a little kid, I asked my mom, I said, why does everyone call me weird? And she says, oh, you're not weird, you're eccentric. And then I said, oh, okay. Well, what does eccentric mean? And she says, well, it means weird. So, all right, I guess I'm weird.
It's a great gift. It's a wonderful gift because you can always see the world with fresh colour, which is lovely.
Fresh colour.
So,
nice.
Yeah.
So, Jaq, I like that, Jaq. What are you currently working on in your life?
Okay. I'm working on an exhibition at the moment. It's just at the early stages, and I'm working with a friend of mine who I've known for many, many years. Because my life before music, my life before art, I studied music. And so this friend of mine is a musician that we met at university, and he's a very talented composer. He's written for, symphony orchestras and all sorts of wonderful things. Andrew Batterham is his name. And so the idea is that we're creating artworks about stories that we feel are important. And so with each artwork there will be music, and which comes first is sort of, it's very organic. So it might be that I create an artwork and then Andrew writes music around that, or that he creates an artwork and he creates music and I create an artwork around that. So it's all fluid. And the idea is in the exhibition that with any given piece, people will be able to hear the music. So we completed one recently, a work with, we went to a jail that's in Melbourne in Australia where I live, called Pentridge. It's an old jail that's closed now, but it's got a lot of character, and you walk in and the hairs on the back of your neck lift a little, because you can just feel that there was stuff that went on there. And at this place, is sort of very, well, it's not completely dark actually. It was evocative, but it didn't feel completely without hope. And in the jail, I have the daughter of a friend of mine who's one of the most beautiful ballet dancers, Molly. So she came and she danced in the jail. And so
wow.
The painting, it was beautiful. It was, so the painting is in this eerie jail, but in the painting it doesn't look eerie anymore, because it's the light that's coming in. And the idea behind it is is that light in darkness, and looking at, it can be looked at in many different ways. But I think in this particular story, so the exhibition will be a series of stories. This story with this artwork and music is that light in the darkness. And in sort of, a world these days with rising mental health issues, and there's a lot of darkness, and we need to keep that light coming through. I suppose that's what this work is for. The next piece Andrew and I are going to look at is to do with refugees, because we have a refugee sort of situation in Australia where, there's a lot of stories of people coming and they've had heartbreaking times, and it's not always been easy when they get to Australia either. So we want to have a look at that and look at some of their stories. And I don't know where that's going to go yet as an artwork, because we're yet to sort of meet with some people and talk to them, and that's how it's going to happen. It's just that we're going to meet and talk and explore and evolve our ideas that way. It could be, we don't know where it's going, because we want it just to flow and just to say, hey, this is important to me. I want to talk about this through art somehow.
Nice.
So, and it's only at its very early stages, and we're both, we both have lots of other things going. I do a lot of portrait commissions and things, and he's teaching as well, and so we also want it to be an enjoyable experience in the creativity. So it means it won't happen quickly, which I'm not sure is good or bad, but it's just what it is. But it's just really fun to give ourselves that freedom to say, hey, let's see where this takes us.
I love the collaboration, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to state this. The part of the being in the prison, right, in the jail.
Yeah.
You were saying like you could feel that there was, I guess you were saying a darkness in there because the dancer was the light.
Yeah. The dancer was the light. We went into the shower area, and that was really dark. We sort of went in there and went, oh, bad stuff happened here. It didn't feel good at all. It was quite,
That's quite
disturbing.
yeah, what kind of images flashed in your head when you walked into that space?
Um,
Or what did you
not
feel?
so much an image. Well, yeah, it was more of feeling. I did get a
Mm-hmm.
shiver, and I don't know whether that's because I've watched Shawshank Redemption too many times, which is an excellent movie.
Indeed.
But yeah, I did get a definite shiver and feel that it was a place of darkness. And it's interesting because this jail has become a recurring theme as well. Because I recently completed a portrait of a man
Mm-hmm.
who he's 85 now. His
Hmm.
name is Tootsie. Well, that's his stage name anyway. But when he was 20 years old, he was sent to Pentridge for being gay.
Hmm.
So he went there for 2 years, and he's had a very difficult life. Tootsie. When he was 16, his twin brother died, and his
Hmm.
mum really didn't deal with that. So 2 years later, and this is just 2 weeks before his 18th birthday, she committed suicide, and Tootsie found her. And then
Wow.
2 years later, he's in jail for being gay, and just the complete injustice of that, just horrendous, really. And then when he was 60, he started. A mate of his said to him, "Hey, what do you think about dressing up in drag and performing?" And so we thought, oh yeah, why not? And so he became known as one of the oldest drag queens in the Southern Hemisphere. And
Okay.
he's 85 now, and he's a delight. So so I just finished painting Tootsie, and with this story of Pentridge when Andrew and I started on this exhibition, and once again the idea of Pentridge came up. So it's been a bit of a
Hmm.
recurring image and theme, and feels important that it's starting the exhibition actually. But
Hmm.
yeah.
I talked to an artist the other day, and she was doing a very similar work. I think it was portraitures, but she would spend a lot of time with prisoners and and and
Oh,
and
interesting.
connecting
Yeah.
with that aspect. Um, it's very interesting. I would really encourage you to spend more time there in that space. Um, and maybe not encourage you. I don't know. This is for you to figure out because you have to be very, very careful and super conscious of who you are
Yeah.
when going into a space like that. I'll tell you a crazy story. I lived in a place called Savannah, Georgia, and Savannah, Georgia is like is known to be like the haunted place. I mean, it's freaky.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have these beautiful squares in the city, the way it's mapped out, and there's these beautiful trees, and it's just full of what they call Spanish moss. It's like this grass that's hanging down off the trees, and in all the squares they have the Spanish moss coming off these trees, except for this one square. There is a spot which does not grow this Spanish moss. And it happens to
Oh.
be a spot in which they hung years ago a
Oh.
lady. I guess they called her a witch or some stupid thing, and they hung her there, and she died. And where she died, like there is no Spanish moss in that spot, and and so there's all these freaky stories. And one day, uh, my two buddies and I, Dave, Brian, and myself, we got up very, very early in the morning and we were going to go walk around the dormitory and just pray for the people and the space and all this stuff. And we had one rule. And the rule was whatever pops into your head, whatever images come in, if anything, pops in, stop and tell us, right?
Okay.
So we're at this place called Dyson House, which used to be this old hotel, which then the school converted. I was in college at the time, which they converted into a dormitory. And so we're on the second floor, and we walk and we turn the corner, and boom! As soon as I turned the corner, like this image popped in my head, and it was so violent and so horrendous, um,
Oh,
that it shocked me, right? And I didn't say anything. And so we kept walking, and then I remembered our rule, and I was like, "Hey, guys, I had this experience." And so we went back to the door, and what was crazy is they had the same experience, but they were both terrified to say it too. And
oh,
and what it was this woman being brutally raped and murdered in that's the image that I got. And it was just out of the blue. I was like, what? And what was crazy were two things. Down that entire corridor of dormitories, we had these big windows, and you were allowed to put stuff up in your windows or on your door. And literally every single door was something that was like over the top sexual or over the top violent, like every single door.
wow.
And so we're like, whoa, there's something freaky here. And so we went and we did research on this hotel, and found that because it was near the bottom of the main bridge years ago, before the school came in there, they which cleaned it up. But before then, it was where all the prostitutes went. And this Dyson house was it was a hotel where people would come, and even like famous people would go and like get prostitutes, and all this weird stuff would go on in there. And so it was one of those moments where it was like, oh, there's more to life than um
Yeah, yeah.
you
You
get
have those, don't you?
yes.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah.
said this darkness, uh there now we're calling it darkness, but whatever it may be, it might be just an energy, whatever it might be, whatever terminology you want to use. But as an artist, it could become an incredible resource of incredible stories that come out of there. um
Yeah.
and
Well, it does seem to keep coming up as a theme. So I'm a bit like you. I feel that when things like that come to you, you sort of got to go with it, really.
yeah,
Because it'll just keep coming back to you anyway if you don't. So if you ignore it, yeah.
yeah. Sometimes it's a strange thing. I'll tell you, the one time in my life where I was paranoid terrified, I went
Oh,
and I went to Puerto Rico years ago, and I ended up meeting my grandmother. Now, last time I saw my grandmother was probably 25 years before that, right? When I was like a little kid. And and at this time she was in her 90s. She was about the size of Yoda, looked like Yoda. Um Big ears
yeah.
like Yoda. It was funny. Um and and then when I left, I went. She was on one side of the island. I was living on the other side at the time, and I went back home. And when I walked up to my apartment, I felt like somebody was watching me, right? Like it was freaky, and I got so nervous that when I walked in to my apartment, like luckily it wasn't a big apartment, but I got so paranoid, like I had to even look inside the shower and I looked in my closet, and I'm like, nobody's
Wow.
here, like it was like nobody was there. And so across the street, a very dear friend of mine lived, a guy I was working with at the time, but he so doesn't believe in this kind of stuff that I couldn't even
Yeah.
call him, right? Because he'd be like, dude, you're acting crazy, right? But I swore there was someone in my apartment. And then when I lay down and I try to go to sleep, I felt like there was maybe 100, 200 eyeballs staring at me. It
Oh,
was
wow.
the
Okay.
creepiest experience I ever had. And and what's weird is my grandmother was very much into this thing called Santeria, which is like this a mix between Catholicism and like voodoo weird stuff they do in the islands, and it's just very creepy thing. And then when I went to her house, she had like this weird little shrine, and it was like, oh, what's going on here, right? And
Yeah.
and so I called my buddy Brian, who was on the island, and and so I had to go in, and we both agreed that I had to go into this energy, okay, into this
Okay.
into these eyeballs, if you want to call it, and just speak with it. And what was very crazy is
Okay.
by the time I came out of this experience, what I spoke to it was, um, because what I realized what it was, and this is what Brian, my buddy, was saying, was it was my ancestors. You know, it wasn't necessarily that this energy came to harm me, but it was
Yeah.
curious, like what are you, who are you, why are you here, type of, you know. And so I
Yeah.
had,
Okay.
and it was weird. I spoke into this energy, and I was just like into this darkness, if you will. And I promised something to it. I said, you know, I will honor us. I will build a life and a legacy that will honor us, right? And as soon as I said
Yeah.
that, it just was like a wind. It was almost as if a cold wind came in, like a very refreshing, calm, cool wind, and it just it just went away. It was very,
Oh wow.
very creepy, but very cool. And so, you know, this mass, this energy, whatever you want to call it, souls of the dead, or what, I don't know what it is. I
Yeah.
don't know the science behind it, but I know the experience, and it
Yeah.
needed to be spoken to. It needed to know. It needed a voice, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so maybe that's something that you can explore. Maybe there's a lot of quote unquote stories that need a voice in that place that were never heard before, you know?
Oh, I'm sure there are. There'd be so many stories, and probably some. Yeah, well, probably some that are light in the darkness, a bit like Tootsie. That
Mm-hmm.
he's light in that darkness, and he shouldn't have been there. That there's a story
Yeah.
that that he was there though, and it formed his life, and it impacted continuously. So I'm sure there'd be lots of stories that dark and light within that mix, and probably stories that do need to come out. So yeah, it's an interesting space. They're redoing it now so that it's going to have
Oh, really?
cafes and air. Yeah. So
That's
it's modern
interesting.
society. Yeah,
Wow.
it will be interesting actually. Well, yeah, it will be interesting to see how that goes, and how if the mood changes, or if
Indeed.
it still has that element there. So
Wow.
yes, we got in just before they were about to change everything around, and we're very lucky actually because we had a bit of a special tour around the place
Mm-hmm.
to see everything, and then we're just given free rein to get whatever reference that we needed, which was wonderful actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what are your ideas um on this connection between art making and music?
It's interesting. I tend to create a lot of art that has a music element in it or is of musicians.
Hmm.
And I think that goes back to the fact that I did study music in my youth
Mm-hmm.
prior to moving into it. Was always about like balance for me, because I love both music and art, but
Mm-hmm.
and started with the music, but I think that I'm a better artist and moved towards that. And yeah, but the music was good. It was a growth for me, and I think I needed to do that to have a platform to move with my art somehow. And my family are musicians. My mum's a
Hmm.
violinist, and
Wow.
yeah, so there's always music. There's been music in the family. Um, so yeah, I think that it's always come back. A lot of people that I've painted, musicians, Elena Katz-Chernin, who's a beautiful composer, Tony Gould, who's an Australian pianist and composer, does a lot of improvisation, Leo, who is great performer. So yeah, they do seem to. I do seem to be very drawn to that for some reason, and I do paint other people as well. There just seems to be a lot of musicians. I suppose that makes sense. We sort of gravitate to what we know a little bit.
Indeed.
Yeah, but I have a love of music. I think that, and I think the combination of music with art, well, it's just appealing to, more than one sense, really, to create a full and rich experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How would you describe the difference between a composer and a performer?
Yes. Well, a composer's the creation, really. It's the the performer's the interpretation of the composer. But I know myself when I was playing, because I played the piano and the violin, that and I think maybe this is one of the reasons I chose art, is because then you could be the complete creator. Whereas when I was playing music, it's creative. There's no doubt about that, and it's wonderfully creative. But it's still interpreting someone else's creation. It's very important. But yeah, I think that's the main difference. Whereas with the visual art, I was composer and performer when I'm doing my art, essentially. Mm-hmm. Which I quite like. Maybe I'm a control freak. Maybe that's why as well.
Well, music, a composer and a performer, they call that a singer-songwriter, correct? Or I guess if you're singing.
Well, yeah, well, they are. Then they're both together. That's the composer and the performer together. So I painted Lior, who's a singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. So that's putting them both together. But for example, Elena Katz-Chernin performs as well, but there's plenty of composers out there who just write. So what they do, they don't actually perform their own music. And there's plenty of performers out there who don't compose, who don't create, but are the interpreters, which is, of course, very important. And also, they create within that, in how they play, and they might improvise around it as well. Because improvisation is, that's composition, really.
Yep.
But yeah.
That's cool. You said you moved from the music to the art because that gave you more control in terms of composing and performing, or let's say painting or drawing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because one of my goals in life is to, within the visual arts, is actually separate the two. And and then you have
How are you going to do that?
Well, by focusing on design and composition. And so, which is basically, the way I look at it is like it's the architecture of a piece. And then when you paint it, then you put on your contractor hat, right? So now you have to build the building that the architect designed. And so it's interesting. I've had several artists come to me and say, "Oh, if you just compose the image, I'll paint it, and then I'll, when I sell it, I'll give you 50%, right?" And so those are things that we're actually experimenting with. And like I met a lot of
Jeff Koons.
What was that?
Jeff Koons. That's what he does essentially. Jeff Koons.
Okay.
He does the concept and the ideas, and gets the and he's got a warehouse of people working for him to. I think. Well, I met a couple of people who did work for him, and so he has the vision, and they put it together essentially. And I had that with somebody hire me actually to do some illustrations and things for his work, so contracting out artisans, and he did some sculptural works, and he would design the sculpture, but then send it off overseas and get somebody else to actually create it.
Oh wow!
And I always found that interesting, because who is the artist? Is the artist the person who comes up with the idea, or is it the person who actually carves the wood or molds the clay, or even if they're being directed as to what they're doing? It's an interesting concept.
It is. And like in my case, I don't need the fame, right? So I would rather the painter put their name on it and sell that painting, right? Um, like for me personally, it's just the thrill of knowing great compositions are available, are out
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
and because that's one aspect of it. But then there's actually great painting and great rendering and things like that. Like those are different skill sets, and
yeah,
and so and that can be a nice collaboration because uh, I don't know, about 20 years ago I kind of came into this understanding that there are just people who are naturally gifted at starting things like authoring, and then there are other people
yeah,
who just love finishing, and sometimes
yeah,
finishers are not good at starting, like they struggle with the ideas or how to make it work, but once they're past that hump, they just they go into their place of zen and they're just in production mode, right? And they're just painting and or whatever the medium is that they're using, and they're incredible at that.
yeah,
And so my hope is that not my hope, but my vision is that in fine art we come to a place where you can be a composer and a
yeah.
performer, or you can work in collaboration. You know, become like a who's the composer king? What was her first name? Um, Sarah King.
Um, Carol King? Is
Carol
that who?
King.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah, 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 yeah,
Carol King, yeah?
yeah.
Yeah.
She wrote tons and tons of songs, right? Like for people,
Yeah, she did.
and Lionel Richie. I mean, there's just a whole handful of these great composers, but then they also then turned into performers, and
I
so
think Dolly Parton was a bit like that too, that she actually started off she wrote songs, hit songs for stacks of people.
really,
And, but yeah, yeah.
I didn't
And,
know that.
well, Whitney Houston's,
Oh,
what was
true.
that song that she had in the I Will Always Love You? I think
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what it's called, but
yeah,
I
that's
won't sing
it.
it for you. I wouldn't always do that to you.
Uh,
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
yeah,
That's all you
in the
need is that
movie The
one note.
Bodyguard.
We know what it is. The
Yeah,
Bodyguard. That's it.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure Dolly Parton wrote that. I'm
I know she sang
hoping
it.
that listeners
She
won't
may
be
have.
proving me wrong. No, she didn't. Yeah, no, I think that. Yeah, I think when Dolly Parton wrote it originally, it was a bit of a country style
Yeah,
sort of thing. But well, I'm 80% sure that's correct information. So if
I
listeners
believe you're correct. I
go and
think it's
Google
like
that, I hope that
97%
they
correct.
don't. They yeah, okay. You've got to be careful sharing facts about things when you're not 100% sure. When people are listening, and they'll go and they'll say, "I looked that up and that wasn't true."
And then we can say
But
together,
anyway, the concept is
nice,
right.
great.
The concept
Yes,
is there. It's what we're out about. Yeah. Um,
this is
but
a
yeah,
fact free zone. You get the gist.
fact-free zone. Good. That's what I like. It's a gist zone
It's a
rather than
gist
a fact
zone.
zone.
And if you can't deal
Yeah,
with
that's
that, then
why.
we can say bugger off.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
Hmm.
it's an interesting concept, just the different aspects of art, because we are very sort of you're a painter and you're this, and I think that there are more collaborations happening, and like how you're working as well, and a lot of contemporary art is looking more at that side of things too. That and it's sort of it's up and then it's gone as well. It's not lasting as well. So many different styles and forms, which makes it quite exciting in the art world these days.
Yeah.
Mm.
So which do you like better? Illustrating or doing the fine art?
Doing the fine art, really. The illustration, well, it was sort of a way to find a use for my fine art
Mm.
in a way when I was starting out. But then I just and it was really lovely, and I learned a lot through it. But then more and more I was just drawn towards just doing what I wanted to do without a brief, really, to say, oh, I'd really like to paint this, or I'd really like to follow this line of thought with this. I think that both have their strengths, though. And there's just something lovely about holding a book that you've illustrated. I mean, it's a really, really lovely experience. It's not collaborative at all, though. You sort of think that working on a book would be more collaborative experience than doing your own fine art, but it's not. The authors and the illustrators are never in touch with each other, and it's an interesting world. That whereas in the film industry, for example, everybody would be communicating with everybody. But no, not so in the publishing industry. I'm very drawn to portraiture. I love people's faces and characters and personalities. And the more that I started to do that, the more I sort of left behind the illustration side of things.
So you do these images where they're kind of like almost cityscapes.
I do.
And I was really drawn to those. Now, would you consider that more of a fine art thing, or is that more of an illustration?
More of a fine art. I think that there's very little difference between illustration and fine art, though. I think it's really a word and it's a purpose. That when things are decided to be for a book or a publication, it becomes illustration, and when it's chosen for an exhibition, it becomes fine art. But really, there are people who are illustrating who are, it's art. They're artists. It's all just words, really, I think. Words and purpose. The paintings of the cityscapes that I did were very much intended just to be artwork. They're not for an illustrative purpose at all. I seem to just about always do them at a funny angle, and I don't know why that is. I think I look at things with my head sideways, and so maybe that's where that comes from. And I sort of view them as portraits as well, actually. So even when I'm not doing a portrait, whatever subject I'm doing feels like a portrait to me. So the cityscapes were portraits of the buildings in my mind, because I really felt that they had characters of their own and stories within them. And like you, I really love stories, and I think that everything is a story, really, that there's an underlying message and tale that goes with anything that you paint and any place that you visit or person that you speak to. They're portraits of buildings on funny angles, essentially.
That's a great title for a book. Portraits of buildings on funny angles.
It is.
Your angles I thought were fascinatingly strange, and in a good way. I was like, wow. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun conversation, because you're fearless. You have the courage to push, and it's amazing the stuff that you can read in people's work. You can really get a sense of their personality, their energy, and it's interesting in your work. It was almost, I feel like I'm walking through, when I'm looking through your portfolio, I feel like I'm walking through the movie Inception.
Oh, that's great. I love that movie. What a lovely thing to say. Because that's things that I've always been drawn to. I don't know that I am fearless, but I love that you say that, because I would like to be fearless very much. And I think that that as an artist, it's a great challenge, isn't it, to look within yourself as much as you can and have that courage to draw on it. Now, and I suppose that's for myself, that's my the thing that I want to do more and more. And well, I know that I'm not fearless, because I know that there's more that I can draw on that I've not had the courage to do so yet. But I hope to get to that space. But I remember when I was a kid, I saw some works by Dali, and I was just mesmerized by them. And I think that had a big impact on me as a kid. I just really loved that. And I loved his distortion of reality. Since then, I've read about him, and he wasn't necessarily the nicest person, which did impact on how I viewed his art, actually. I couldn't like it as much when I knew that. But yeah, and it comes back to storytelling again. That, you know, if you can distort the image or the form, or create unexpected places and narrative with it, then you're telling an interesting story. And I also like the fact that it's a story that is different for anybody looking at it. I think that's the great thing about art, actually, is that someone will look at your work, Don, and think one thing, and then somebody else who's had completely different experiences in their life will look at it and go, oh, no, that's not what it means. This is what it means.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is why I think artist statements are very interesting, because I'm not sure that we have the right to tell people what to think about our art. I suppose we have the right to tell them where we came from, what our launch pad was. So so maybe they're okay.
I think we're going to agree on 97% of things, but that other 3%, I think we just had that conversation right now. That's actually something like is a pet peeve of mine when in the art world, is allowing things to be open to interpretation. And
okay.
Yeah,
you don't think so?
I despise it, and not saying that it doesn't. I just, one of my things in my quest is to objectify art. Is to make art more objective, and the reality is it will always have some subjectivity to it, and you're 100% correct that, you know, when people look at something, and it doesn't have to be art, it could be anything, it could be an iron, you know, it could it was funny, I was teaching my daughter this, and it was an iron, and when I was looking at the iron from my side, I could see the color blue, and I could see the color white. On her side of the iron, she could see orange and black, right? And so I asked her, I said, hey, so what's the color of this iron? She's like, black and orange. I said, no, it's white and blue. No, Dad. And so we're, you know, and I was testing her, and I said, come on this side.
Yeah.
And she came on, and it was white and blue, right? So it literally was the opposite of the two colors. And her eyes got big, like, you know, like we're fighting about the same thing, you know. It was kind of cool.
Well, isn't that how most wars get fought?
Exactly.
All fighting for the same thing, or arguments, at least within a household. Indeed. I suppose I'm sort of coming from the angle that sometimes with an artist, there are some, now this is not all artists, you know, it's a generalization, obviously, but many artists will create something, and it's hard for them to put words to it. And that's one of the reasons they do it visually, is because they don't necessarily have the words. And sometimes they don't even know why they're creating something. They're just creating it. And so I know I've done that sometimes myself, that I've just been drawn towards doing something without even really knowing why, and just going down that avenue. And so if somebody sort of said to me, can you explain it? I come up with something, but it's not always, sometimes it's just a feeling, and it's really hard to express that. And so I'm always really grateful if somebody can have an opinion and that I don't have to give it to them, that they have a feeling towards it, and that I don't necessarily have to put words to, because it's hard to find the words sometimes.
Well, and that's the
melodramatic, truth. I know, I don't mean it like that. Yeah.
No, but it is the truth. It is hard. And that's why, like with my students, what I do a practice with them before they're permitted to create visuals. They have to put it in writing, because in a way they're making a contract with their own soul. I'm an asshole when it comes to it.
That's hard.
You know,
and then practice though.
And then we the number one question we ask continuously out of our entire process is, how does that support your story? Right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the story is the point, like it's the purpose of it, because it's strange, like when you become that focused on it, literally, and I love this moment when the artist finally realizes this, literally, if you change the direction of one, not many, just one line, it totally violates the story. Like it was last week, we were looking at an image, and it was so freaky. Everything was so great in it, and we put a horizontal, and then we went in and we erased it and we put a diagonal line. It was just one line, and I just love when this
Yeah.
moment, but it totally radically changes the whole experience of the painting. And then, because I teach in these little groups, then we can have a consensus, like, and it's just freaky because it's almost it's almost always unanimous. That's the solution. Like, that's what the spirit, the muse, the energy, the story is crying for, and anything else would be a violation to it. And so, coming it from that perspective, I feel like there's a great, now everything you were saying, I experienced that. Like, and artists, we experience that where it's like we don't know what it is, and so and this is what I consider sketching, right? Like, that's sketching. Taking the time to sketch it's that conversation you're having with that feeling or that idea or that experience, to the point that you're starting to get the right answers, get the right direction, get
Yeah.
clarity. And I think one of the issues with a lot of artists is that they jump in and they say, "Oh, it's done," and it's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa," like, "Oh, hold on, you don't even know her name yet," you know, um, and uh, and so, there's different approaches, but for me, like, I like I like leading artists down that alley, which is extremely deliberate and intentional, and it's an incredible
Yeah.
experience. I love seeing their faces when they write down what is the experience you want the viewer to have, right? And they follow that through the entire process. And then when they go hang that in a gallery or something, and they listen to the people talk, and the people are like, "Oh man, this thing makes me feel this way," and it's almost word for word what they wrote down before they ever even
Oh,
sketched
okay.
anything. It's
That's very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Um,
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I don't want to discredit the other aspect where you're kind of just flowing, and you can't be in control of it. Um,
Yeah.
and so there is a
Well, I'm
place for
going
that.
to give a
Give me
go
1 second
doing
here.
what you. Oh, yes.
All right, I'm back. I just had to
Oh,
reset my
hello.
mic because there's a cord, and sometimes if I hit it with my leg, it knocks the mic out weird. So I was
Yeah.
getting
No
all
worries.
excited there. Uh, Yeah, and so there is this beautiful, intuitive, just kind of like your tuning fork. Your mind is out of it. You don't want to overthink it. Part of art making, and there's something very, very lovely in it. Very lovely. And then
Yeah.
there's,
I think
mhm.
when I was doing my books, my children's books, that was very much the planning and the which is actually great, because you very much learn if you didn't plan every step, it just didn't work.
Yep.
And it, it could be intuitive, but only within the parameters of what was already decided and worked on and worked out. Um, I think that but I do still design and very much plan the steps that I make. So I think it's more that once that step's done, then it's moving into the more intuitive and the flow of it all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I always encourage artists, like,
Interesting stuff.
because there's a bunch of students that I have that that they struggled in the beginning trying to be too much in control, right? And they weren't
Yeah,
used to it, and so we had to just basically um, come up with another system. And the system is, go paint the painting that you want to paint, right? Like, get it out of
yeah,
yourself. Like, don't think, just do it your way. And oftentimes I'll have them just do that with black, white, and a bunch of grays, right? Like, don't even worry about color. Just
yeah,
like get the thing out. And then they'll come back and then we make an agreement. Like, this is not a finished painting. This is just a sketch, you know? So now how
yeah,
can we refine it and then really make it into a masterpiece? Um, and that seems to work for the artists who feel like they have to get into this space where they're just expressing without,
yeah,
and they're kind of separating their mind. And that's a totally valid experience. It's a very powerful experience, to be quite honest. I mean, I think it's probably,
yeah,
if you can't do that, I'm not really sure you can be an artist. Meaning, like, if you can't just be in that moment, in that that consciousness that's not,
yeah. I agree. I think it's a very important space. It's yeah. You have to be able to, but you also have to be able to get yourself there. It's that
Mm-hmm.
waiting for creativity to strike is you'll be oftentimes waiting a long time. And to get into that space, I think it's sometimes just as simple as starting. Off you
Mm-hmm.
go,
Yeah.
just start. I think they say for writers that writers should just spend the first 15 minutes just writing. Doesn't matter what they write, just write.
Yep.
And that'll get them started for the day. And it's interesting, writers who are morning people, and I've noticed artists for the most part are evening people. Do you paint mostly at night time or in the morning?
That's a tough one. When I was younger, I used to love working through the night. Um, what I find works best for me now is, the truth is, at nighttime, even though I want to work at night, my energy's
Yeah,
gone through the day. So what I find, if I can do it, this is what I love to do, is to go to bed, maybe 9, 10 o'clock, wake up about four
yeah,
hours because I only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night. So, wake up around 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I have about a 4 to 5 hour window when it's quiet. Um, I think it's interesting. A lot of religions, I believe they do it in the Jewish faith. I know they do it in the Muslim faith. They're and in their religions are very conscious that there is a specific time in which to pray, which is around, like, I don't
yeah,
know, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock. Like, it's really, really late slash early in the morning. And there's, right when there's something, an energy that's going on in the earth at that time. You think about it, like, where the moon is rising tides and lowering tides.
yeah,
Like, there's something going on in the cosmos at specific times during the day. And um and I just think there's a sensitivity that goes on, and it becomes a very spiritual thing. There's a quietness. Most
yeah,
of the earth is asleep, and it's starting to wake up in this, you know one of the weird things I'll do is, if I have a problem that I can't solve, be it in art or life or whatever, I will go to sleep. And I'll
yes,
either get the answer in my dream, or, more than not, the moment in which I'm waking and my body is still, like, dead, but my mind is awoke, like, is waking. Like, there's this weird fractions of a second right when you're waking up, and it's in that transition that all of a sudden, like, incredible clarity comes to me, and I'll solve problems,
yeah,
like, bam, 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 right? But it's like, it's so fleeting, so fast, and you have to be, like, aware of it. Um, so yeah, So I personally like to wake up very, very early, like, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, maybe even 2 if I
Wow.
get enough sleep, and then work that way. So I guess technically it's still late night, depending. It's just considered morning because I woke up
It
instead of,
is.
trying to stay awake.
Yeah. And you
Is
don't get tired through the day. I'd be exhausted.
No, like, as I'm getting older, I've always had this fantasy of sleeping during the daytime, like, say, like taking a nice 2-3 hour
Okay.
nap, let's say 2 hour
Oh,
nap.
yeah.
Um,
That's civilized.
but being raised in a capitalist society, you're considered a lazy son of a bitch if you go to sleep at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So,
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I'm like, if I get older, or I always used to tell people, man, I want to become a millionaire just so I can sleep without guilt.
So you can have nana naps.
Exactly.
That's funny. If you hear some meowing in the background, that's my cat. She
Oh,
wants her supper.
okay.
And she's
It's supper.
particularly spoiled. And if she doesn't get supper, then I'm woken up at 2 a.m. and told to get up and feed her, which I ignore, of course. But yeah, so just there's been a couple of meows, which I thought I should explain in
Oh,
case you
okay.
could hear them.
Okay. I thought I just said something
Yeah.
really nice, and it's like, oh, okay. Um, so for yourself, like, how do are you a night person then?
Yeah.
A
Yeah, I'm
night
a
owl?
night person, but if I was on your side of the world, it would be considered morning. So maybe it's just that my body clock is not suited to Australia. I don't know, but no, I'm definitely a night person. I tend to go sleep about 1 in the morning, I guess.
Okay.
I do a lot of work between 8 p.m. and 1,
Oh, okay.
and I try to go to sleep earlier, but I just can't. I just can't. My
Yeah.
mind won't let me do that. It doesn't like it. So yeah, and sort of then in the morning, yeah, I potter in the morning. I sort of,
Potter.
I
I
reckon
like
it's
that.
probably by about 8 o'clock at night. I finally said, okay, come on, you got to get some stuff done here. Get going. So yeah, yeah. No, but I think I like that time as well because it's quiet and it's peaceful,
Yeah.
and the busyness of the day. I mean, I still do paint during the daytime, and I love it. And it's better lighting as well, of course. But I like the tranquility of nighttime when
Yeah.
the world's asleep.
Yeah.
It's nice.
There's a story years ago. I think this is what inspired me to work at night. It was the elves and the shoemaker, or the shoemaker and the elves,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And when I read that, like, something psychologically happened in me where I just fell in love with this idea of, like, working through the night so that magically something was created in the morning,
Ah,
right? Like, when
you
everybody,
want to
like,
be a magician?
well, that's kind of funny. um,
Yeah.
yes. Well, my brother's a magician, and
Ah, okay.
that's why I got home very late last night, because he had a TV show that was filming one of his shows, and so he wanted to make sure
Ah,
he had extra help, so I went out and helped him yesterday. So we didn't get back to like 2 in the morning or whatnot. Um,
so you know the
so
tricks. You know how he does it.
yeah. It was
Ah,
interesting.
okay.
He's been doing it for 20 some years now, so I've known most of them. And then about maybe 2 or 3 shows ago, he was doing a show off Broadway, and I went up and he had a couple new illusions that I never saw, and it was like, wow, this is what people feel like, because I didn't know how they were done, and I got to yeah, now I know how they're done, but yeah, that
Yeah,
was cool.
that's
Uh,
pretty cool. Yeah.
so when it comes to, I'm kind of we really didn't get into this part of the conversation, but I am curious. As a little Jacqueline, um,
Yeah.
or Jack,
And
like,
that I was called that by my mum when I was in trouble. Often.
oh, Jacqueline,
Yeah. Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, and
Jacqueline.
then your 14 different last names. Like, who are
Yeah, that's it.
whatever name you go by now, get over here. I
Yeah.
actually hear that from my family. They're like, I would
Oh
have,
dear.
I didn't know what name to find you on Facebook with.
That's
So
a good thing. Keep them guessing.
with exactly. what's your story? What's like how did you stumble? Did you stumble into the visual arts, or were you much more into music when you were younger?
No, I was always visual artist
Okay.
ever since I can remember. Um, just loved drawing from even my first memories. And my mum I remember my mum teaching the violin, and she used to have these two. In my mind, they were really elderly and old, but they were probably younger than I am now. Would come and have a violin lesson. And whilst one of them was having a lesson, the other would sort of sit and wait, and I'd draw for them. And then they'd swap and I'd draw for the other one. And they made me feel so good about what I was doing. I think it sort of really, those special memories and people that come and influence you, they
Sure.
have a big impact. So, I was always drawing all through primary school. It was sort of what I did. It was my thing. I wasn't good at sports, but art was my thing. Music came to me later in life. But it's sort of music was like this big burst of energy that came and then it went, and I went back to the art again. But I remember when I was a little tyke as well that my mum, I did a drawing for my mum, and I thought it was fabulous, and said, look, have a look at this. And she said to me, my arms don't stick out like that. And that was one of my first lessons in learning to look at things and, what is in front of me, what do I actually see? And I suppose that had an impact on, because my artwork, whilst it had some unusual themes, it's still very realistic in its style. And so I never drew my mum with her arms sticking out ever again, unless she had her arms sticking out, then I might do that. So that's sort of where, it was mainly art. I remember.
Do you remember
I was
what?
going to say I had a lovely.
I'm sorry.
No, you go, Don.
I was going to say, do you remember what that meant or why you drew her arm sticking out?
Well, I think it was just I drew her arm sticking out because, that's just natural development of children, that they sort of start drawing in symbols, really. That and every child starts by drawing with their arms sticking out. But when my mum said that to me, it was like a revelation. It really was. The penny dropped. Oh no, but it actually isn't like that. Why did I even think it was like that? And it really caused me to question. And it's an interesting question too, because it's a question as we often think that we see things that we don't see.
And yet,
you
when
see
you
that a
think
lot
of
with art.
And yet, when you think of a little kid drawing that little figure with the arm sticking out and the legs and the head, it kind of makes me think of Da Vinci's what's the Vitruvian Man or whatever.
Ah, yes.
So it's like,
Yeah.
maybe they're seeing something a lot more than we think they are. I don't know.
Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe there is something there. Maybe that's why because it is a very common thing amongst children, isn't it, to have the arms, but not the legs, so just the arms sprayed out. So, yeah.
But to make
interesting
that's
thing. But it was a
interesting.
very vivid memory for me. That I had with my drawing. And then during secondary school, it was really lovely. I, in fact, had a friend recently had kept a painting that in fact, a couple had kept artworks that I did during secondary school, which was just so sweet that they did that. And I lost touch with them when I caught up with them through Facebook, which is the great connector, of course. They said, look, I still have your artwork, 30 years down the track, which was amazing, really.
That's cool.
Yeah, a lovely honor, really, to have somebody do that for my art, when I was a kid. So,
yeah. Was it kind of freaky? Yeah. Like a freaky experience for you?
No, it was just really nice. It was really affirming, actually. Really, really lovely that I didn't see it as affirming to my art. I saw it as affirming of the friendship. That
nice.
They would care enough to want to keep something that I did, because at the time it was important. I really wanted to create something special for them. So
nice.
it was just lovely. Yeah,
that's cool. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward 5-10 years from now.
Yeah.
I guess the more
Okay.
important question would be, what will we be calling you then? Oh, Jay. Formerly,
Yes.
you're going to be the
It could be
artist
Jay.
formerly
Jay
known
could be
as
good.
Jay.
Jay, that's not
JQ.
bad. I like that.
JQI.
Jay, when I'm ready,
JQI.
I reckon the initials are going to go, DV. They're going to be there.
Yeah. That'd just be a...
You could be DV. DV is quite good.
Well, that's what a lot of people call me, actually.
Oh, do they?
They're like, yeah, they're
There
like,
you go.
DV,
You're already there.
Exactly.
DV. You're
They're like,
already there.
I don't know if we should call you Don or should we call you we're just going to call you DV. So that's what they call me now.
DV is good. I like DV. DV is good.
So you'll be JG.
JG, yeah.
Well, if you say that fast, it sounds like an Indian name. Jajit.
Yeah.
Jiji. So yeah, 5-10 years, Jiji. Oops. From now, ideally, where would you like to be? What would you like to be functioning as?
I would like. Well, I suppose creating things that I really feel have importance. I guess importance is such an important word. It's importance, not quite the right word, but something that, just work that I feel has connection. Connection's a better word.
Connection, okay.
That has connection, yeah. I really view, what I like my work to do is to connect with people, and that, so to have a reaction and to have some sort of meaning if somebody looks at it. And I feel I'm at, the early stages of that, even with my art at the moment. So that, I suppose that's my journey. That's my exploration, is to, cool. And I think the balance for every artist as well is finding that time for creation as well. So I really want to, on a more practical level, have that balance happening more for myself. So I think you mentioned sort of earlier before we're talking, evening for me, morning for you, that as an artist, we all have other things that we do that stop us from being so isolated, other types of businesses and work and things like that. But yeah, I would like to be more isolated.
I gotcha.
Other business types of stuff. Yeah. Just develop some carving out time skills, I think, to create something that has it's sort of even hard to define. Sort of, I don't know what I want to create, but I want it to be something that I feel communicates well and just has, I don't know, that touches something inside myself, I guess.
Indeed, and with the viewer.
Yeah, and definitely with view. And I think that by sort of, reaching from inside, then you reach out to the viewer. It just happens. It's like when you paint somebody's eyes. Just, I don't know, just by thinking about who you're painting, then they sort of develop that sort of soul to them, really, so that other people can connect to it. And you don't really know how that happens. It just sort of, by willing it to happen, it sort of does, really, I think.
Well, there is a bit of a science to it, and that's
there is. Yeah,
it's very strange. Like sometimes I like the mystery of things, and yet when you can demystify stuff and really just know what the science is behind it, then you become it becomes a true power, because now you can consistently execute on it, right? And imagine living in a world where when you flick your hand up, the lights would come on sometimes, right? Like,
they have Google Home for that now.
I know, yeah. Now we can just pick lights on. Yeah. I'm very aware of it. Kitchen lights on.
Yeah.
I was actually using it this morning. Like, computer. Computer. Oh shoot! It just went on. I said, set the alarm for da da da. Play this music.
Yeah, I've got it as well. Yeah, it's great when you. Oh, is that it's speaking in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I like
shut
it.
up.
I like it when I'm painting because you can say, okay, Google, play the, what's the news, or play this piece of music, and
or play the Drawn to.
It's great for the late. Yeah.
Or play the Drawn to Win podcast.
Yeah, I'll pay them exactly right, exactly. One of my great favorite things to say to people, especially to young people, is that art is quite mathematical.
Indeed.
And they always look at me as if I'm a crazy person, but but the greatest mysteries are mathematical. The universe is mathematical. Yeah. But yes, it would be lovely if you could just sort of flick your hand and lights come on without the help of Google Home. It'd be a great experience.
I agree with you that it's very mathematical. It's interesting. A lot of people say, "What's the difference between design and composition?" And there's been a big question, and it's taken me 20 years to kind of get it. And where I'm at right now with it is the way I explained it to you is that when you're in school, that you need to know your language, like your grammar skills and stuff like that. And then you also need to know your math skills. And to me, design is the language that we use to communicate. And composition is the math that gives it the precision, that gives it that harmony, that brings it all together and locks it together. And and then, and I remember years ago, my drawing master would always he would talk about a work of art. He would say, in this essay, and I was like, an essay? What are you talking about, man? Like, it took me years to figure it out. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It is an essay. And, or an arrangement or a composition, which is an essay, just a language composition, right? Where music is a musical composition. So, and from your perspective, like, how do you see it as being a math?
Well, not so much in the feeling of the painting, but certainly in the design and the composition and the execution.
Mm-hmm.
It's measurement. Every part of it is measurement, whether it be angle, length of line, tone and shading is measurement as well. How light it is, how dark it is. Color is measurement. How much of this pigment, how much of that pigment. So it's all measurement based and angle based.
Mm-hmm.
And then the design elements and composition elements is mathematical also. Like you can get into once proportions and angles and there's different sorts of what's the golden rule as well that you can have for composition techniques and it's all based on measurement and line as well, which I'm not a great expert on at all, in fact. Except to know that every time I do something, even if I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing, I'm measuring. I'm measuring in some form of what I'm doing, and I'm calculating it. If this is awesome. This percentage of this, how will that impact on that percentage, sort of thing. So
that's cool. That's cool. I like that a lot. That's nice. So 5 to 10 years from now,
that's a good thing. I was just going to say that I think that the fact that it is mathematical can be really good for some people too, who can think that that drawing or creation is a mystery, that it doesn't need to be a mystery, that the mystery comes later if you want it to. But to just get started, there are basic guidelines and things that you can do, that you can launch from to create really fantastic art. I work a lot. I've worked a lot with kids, and I love being able to tell them that, so that they know that they can go anywhere they want to really with it, which is good to be inspired.
I think with with the idea of math, there's a lot of talk nowadays about balance, work-life balance and balance with this and balance with that.
Yeah.
And I heard this one entrepreneur guy say, I don't focus on balance, I focus on harmony. And it might sound like
Okay.
it's just a thing of semantics, but um, the issue is that when oftentimes people say balance, the connotation that comes up in their head is 50-50 or thirds, there's
Yeah.
three, um, but with harmony, it's a very interesting approach because something could be in harmony at 20-80, right?
Yeah.
So, and it can work. So, like, for example, if you take red and green, they tend to balance themselves out at 50%, right? So that's more of a balanced thing.
Yeah.
But something like a purple and a yellow next to each other, like to have the amount of power that a yellow has, you need a lot of purple to balance it,
Yeah.
right? And so seeking a life of harmony, I think, gives us a far better palette range,
Hmm.
options. We can be not like everyone else. We don't need to be middle of the road or balanced or things like that. We can literally be unbalanced and still be harmony, right? And
Yeah.
have
That's
harmony.
lovely. Yeah,
And
I really like that because I think everybody has a different need as well. That
yes,
some people only need 20% of something, but they do need about 80% of something else to have that harmony. That's a really lovely way to look at it. Hmm.
so let me ask you, uh, as we wrap up this conversation, because I love this conversation and I'm afraid we could probably go for another hour,
Yeah, I know,
another
easily.
hour and a half. Um, but I think what we're going to do is come to the end. Um, I do want to ask you though, who are two or three people that help you bring your gift to the world? Or it could be businesses or
Yeah.
services. That's something I'm kind of curious about with you. So who would you give a shout out or a thank you to that help facilitate, you know, you?
I've had lots of people in my world. I've been very lucky. So
Hmm.
there's this amazing lady called Jacqueline Taylor who's done a lot of curating and work in the arts, and she's always been really supportive of me. So I'd have to definitely give a shout out to her. She's always, thinking of me with different things with art. Uh, and then I think with art, because I've entered lots of works and done well in art prizes, I'm going to give a shout out to a lady called Tina Wilson, who started up what's called
Hmm.
the Black Swan Prize in Australia.
Hmm.
And it was the first time I got into an art prize, and she's always been really supportive as well. And I've continued to get into art prizes. But I think just that when somebody sort of acknowledges you and acknowledges your work, it's really special. So I'm going to definitely give a shout out to Tina as well. I think that she's been fantastic. And I suppose she's symbolic of that sense of self-belief, I think, that was
Hmm.
important to say, hey, somebody believes in what you're doing as well. Isn't that great? And I definitely have to give a shout out to my family because they're the ones that have to put up with me and when I'm working on something to be constantly saying, well, I've done this, what do you think about that? And I'm not sure about that, what do you reckon? And the only reason I'm ever asking them is because I know in my own mind I don't think it's right, but I just need for them to agree with me that I know it's not right. So they're very patient, my beautiful children, Jake and Danny, who are now adults. And they've constantly been muses for me. They've been models for me, and they are wise beyond their years and have always given me outstanding advice as well. So
That's beautiful.
so that's the personal one, and then the two work ones, I think. So I'm
Indeed.
probably going to get finish the podcast and go, oh my goodness, I didn't mention that person, and they so needed to be mentioned. So anyway,
that's the blanket disclaimer. You're in my heart. It just didn't make it to my brain.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. There's the disclaimer.
So before we sign off, I have to ask you the most important question of all.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of different things, and it was just a great conversation. What do you love to eat?
I do love to eat. That's the first answer. Is that yes, I'm a fan of food.
A fan of food. I love it.
Yeah, definite fan of food. And my son is vegan, and he has influenced me a lot, actually, so that I'm now vegetarian, 98% vegan. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually I feel very happy about the decision, and it's been super easy. It's been really, really simple. And there is a Chinese restaurant nearby that delivers the best fake meat ever. It's such nice food.
I think that's all Chinese restaurants. No, I'm sorry.
Well, probably. Yeah, no, it probably is.
Chicken?
This food is particularly excellent. And apart from that, I've got to say chocolate. It's a go-to for many people, I know, but I do love chocolate. So
interesting.
Yeah. And food. and just food.
So you're saying like this?
Just one of these great joys that we share in life.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, just imagine. Oh my goodness! Like, yeah. So this Chinese restaurant, you said they bring you this fake meat, right? What is it like? Yes. Is it like a tofu or something, or what is it?
I don't know how they make it. Yeah, I don't know how they make it. It's not a tofu, because I don't really like tofu very much. It's a soy sort of based thing, but they have a whole heap of different types of fake meat. And because this is the thing about being vegetarian, because just because you're vegetarian doesn't mean that you don't like meat. I very much enjoy the taste of meat and enjoy it, but it's just, I suppose it's from a for personal reasons, choose not to eat it. So this fake meat, it ticks all the boxes, and so they have the fake chicken and the fake pork and the fake everything. And I have run tests on people who've come over and not told them that it wasn't real meat.
You have what on people?
Yeah, run the test. I've been a little bit deceptive and not told them initially.
Okay.
I've told them after they've had a couple of bites and said, "Oh, by the way, do you know it's not real chicken?" But very nice. Like when my daughter lives in a different state, and whenever she comes to visit, the very first thing she asks for is takeaway from this place.
Oh wow,
that's
nice.
Sort of got to be It's become it's like the special visiting meal. Which doesn't help anybody listening, really, because they won't know where the restaurant is. It's Emperor's Palace in Frankston in Australia.
It's called Prince Palace? The town?
Emperors, so the emperor. No, Frankston's the town that they have. And you wouldn't think, because Frankston is not necessarily a place in Melbourne that you would consider to have high cuisine, let me tell you. However, in this instance, it does.
You're making me want to go to the Chinese buffet today.
You are? Oh, there you go.
No, I won't go, but you're making me want to go.
Oh, you won't go?
No.
Oh, okay. You should go. Shout
yourself. Yeah. Good memories there. Good food. But not today. Not today.
What's your favourite food, Don? You've probably mentioned it many times, but I haven't heard yet. So do tell. What
Actually,
would
I haven't mentioned it. Oh wow! Oh. Now I'm stumped. There's something I had in Portugal, which I loved in the morning, and I miss it so much. It's this little custard thing called the pastel nata. And I'd have it with my little espresso in the morning. and I missed that a lot. I
Nice.
also missed the bread
Mm.
there. It was very weird. Uh,
Okay.
like I ate a lot of bread there, and I lost a lot of weight eating a lot of bread. But here in the
Oh,
States, you eat bread and you turn into a doughboy, because it's just a
yeah.
very I guess because the wheat is so refined here that it's not good for you, and over there, it's kind of like an
Yeah.
old,
Okay.
more of an original way of making bread, I guess, and it was good for you. So yeah, and then I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, although I have entertained the thought of one day becoming a vegetarian, um, or maybe
Yeah.
just maybe 5 days a week vegetarian, right? Um,
Mm.
but lately,
It's very
like,
healthy, actually.
well, I guess, I'll be honest
If
with
you do
you.
it right.
Yeah, I guess anything you do right is right. I mean, um, it's strange. Like, it's weird. Intellectually, it makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm not sure I
Yeah.
ever met, in all honesty, a vegetarian who looked healthy to me, and
Okay.
and so a lot of the ones I've met over the years, there's something in their skin. It looks like it's lacking oil. Like, it's just very strange, or strangely, like, I never get this, but when I meet like a fat vegetarian, like, it's it boggles
Yeah,
my
okay.
mind. I'm like, well, I guess that, I guess you're eating candy bars every day, and so technically you're not eating meat. So, they eat chips and
Yeah.
ice
I
cream
think
and
I think that's yes, exactly. That in replacing the meat with the carbs rather than the
indeed,
healthy foods.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But it's so easy to get really good healthy foods these
yeah,
days. I think that if well, where I live anyway, that if I'd sort of tried to do it 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been much harder. Whereas these days they've got some really good food sources
yeah.
around, which is it makes it simple. So
And and I
I've
and
really
I
enjoyed it. It's my fun.
and like, I love meat. My brother and I are going through
Yeah,
almost like this phase of, like, where we're increasing our meat intake. Like steaks every day.
yeah,
And kind of as a little challenge. But when I came back from Portugal in the first 2 months, month and a half, 2 months maybe, I put on 30 pounds, which is almost like about 14 kilos, I think it is, right? And
yeah. Okay.
it was like, what the hell, right? And it freaked me out. And so I set this target, where I wanted to lose that, and I did. And the way I did it was by increasing my vegetables, like, tremendously. And in the morning, I had, like a berry, like a smoothie. And so it was just increasing
Yeah,
my fruit, my vegetables, which was probably about 80% of my meal. And um, also not mixing fruit with meat. So, like, sometimes I might have like some fruit. I might eat a meal with meat or protein, even if it was like peanuts or something, and then having fruit. Like, I guess
yeah.
it did something not good in me, and it blew me up. And once I separated that and gave it the amount of time that it needed, quote unquote, I
That's
added the
interesting.
math
Yeah,
to my meals. Like, all of a sudden,
yeah. There you
like,
go. Math and meals.
yeah, and I just started losing, like, all this weight. And then with the meat, I would just eat very small portions one time a day with it. And that worked so well. It was like almost every day I was losing a pound. It was crazy. And
Wow. Okay.
so that was really, really cool. So, I often think, like, probably as I get older, I could see myself leaning to a high fish diet with lots and lots of
Yeah.
salads, fruits, and vegetables, and being very content and satisfied and very happy with that. And then occasionally the beast in me needs to sink my teeth into a nice cow.
Yeah.
So, but you know, but I at my age now, I actually, for the first time in my life, am actually enjoying vegetables, and I never did before. And so it's kind of a neat
Yeah.
experience. So,
Yeah, I noticed a change too, that I reached a stage where maybe it's to do with not changing your names as well, that as you change your names, you develop a greater liking for vegetables proportionally. Could be, because I'm the same. I like vegetables far more than I used to, and certainly when I was a kid, because I was the typical, I don't want to eat my vegetables child. So,
yeah, it's weird. It's I don't want to get too much into this talk, but it's amazing when you eat certain food, like when you eat foods, the effect it has on your internal body, right? So like with high vegetables, you feel more hydrated, you think clearer, you know, these kinds of
you
things.
do.
And I think growing, you know, 41 years into life, I have enough experience to know when I felt like crap, and those times when I didn't, where when I was younger, you know, it's all like blurred because you just have all this energy. And uh in all honesty, like with meat, I love it because I love the taste of it, but outside of that, there's really no um and outside of, you know, the benefits of, you know, protein and things like that, but you can get protein from other things that aren't, you know,
Yeah, you
animals.
can.
So it's but I just like the way the veggies make me feel, and so I eat a lot of them, to be honest, like a
That's
lot.
good. Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
but I don't eat very much chocolate. I'm not a chocolate guy, so
No,
you can have all my chocolate.
okay, I'll take it.
like
Thank you.
at Easter time and Christmas time, my mom uh, gets us these boxes of chocolate and all this stuff, and so and my ex-wife, she used to love that. And so, like, even though
Okay.
we've been separated for 5 or 6 years now, like when I go to drop my kids off on after Easter, I'm like, give this to your mom, you know. And so she gets the little
She's still
box.
getting you chocolate.
Yeah, she still gets my
That's great.
chocolates. One day I'll have someone else who will get my chocolates, but for now,
There you
she can still
go.
have my chocolates. But
It seems
very cool.
fair. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I just really enjoyed being able to talk about such a lovely range of subjects. It was great. It was good fun.
Yeah, it was
So thank
nice.
you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. All right. Be well. Bye bye. In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.